November 18, 1942. The air over Guadalcanal is thick, humid, and heavy with the scent of tropical decay and aviation fuel. High of Henderson Field, the atmosphere is tense for the pilots of the Imperial Japanese Navy, men who have spent the last year looking down on the world. From the cockpits of their Zero fighters, this day marks the beginning of the end. It is the moment their faith begins to crack. Imagine the scene through the eyes of a veteran Japanese pilot. His hands, gloved and steady, grip the control stick that has been an extension of his will. But his eyes are wide, fixed on a sight that defies his understanding of aerial warfare. Rising from the battered runways of Guadalcanal are machines. These machines look nothing like airplanes. They don't have the slender, elegant lines of a dog fighter. They are twin-engine beasts, dragging two long booms behind them. They look for all the world like double-headed demons rising from a mechanical hell. These are the P-38 Lightnings of the 339th Fighter Squadron. And they are climbing. They are climbing with a violence and a speed that violates the physics the Japanese pilots thought they knew. On this day, the myth of the Invincible's Zero meets the brute force of American industry. And on this day, the nightmare begins. To understand the sheer terror of that moment, we have to go back. We have to understand the Zero myth. Since the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Mitsubishi A6M Zero had ruled the Pacific. It was the sword of the samurai reborn in duralumin. It was light, it had incredible range. In a turning fight, it wasn't touchable. In the skies over the Philippines and the Dutch East Indies, Allied pilots flying P-40s and Wildcats were slaughtered. The Zero could turn inside them, dance around them, and shred them. The Japanese pilots, elite warriors trained to a razor's edge, felt like gods. They believed that spirit and skill could conquer any machine. When Japanese intelligence first saw sketches of the P-38, they laughed. They saw a big, heavy, complicated aircraft. To them, it looked clumsy. They assumed it would be just another large target for their nimble heroes to toy with. Even the legendary Ace Saburo Sakue, writing in his memoirs later, admitted that his first instinct upon seeing the twin-engine fighter was the confidence of a hunter spotting a slow, fat prey. But on that November morning in 1942, that confidence evaporated. The Japanese pilot reporting back to his commander at Rabaul couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. He reported that these new monsters didn't just fly, they tore through the sky. They climbed at speeds that left the Zero gasping for air. The terrifying realization was simple. The Americans had changed the rules. The P-38 Lightning was not built for the elegance of a duel, it was built for brutality. It was built for the brutality of an execution. Designed by the genius Kelly Johnson, this plane was a radical departure from convention. While Japanese engineers were obsessing over shaving ounces of weight to gain maneuverability, Johnson went the other way. He installed to Allison liquid-cooled engines. But not just engines, he equipped them with turbo-superchargers. This detail is crucial. In 1942, this was the equivalent of science fiction, while standard engines choked in the thin air of high altitude. The P-38's turbo-superchargers forced compressed air into the manifold, allowing the engines to breathe freely at 30,000 feet, or even 40,000 feet. The two engines combined produced over 2,300 horsepower. It wasn't just a plane. It was a manned rocket. And then there was the weaponry. Most fighters of the era had guns mounted in the wings. This meant the bullets had to converge at a specific point in front of the plane. The pilot had to calculate the distance perfectly. The P-38 ignored this limitation. It clustered its entire arsenal one 20mm Hispano cannon for 50 caliber machine guns. Right in the nose, directly in front of the pilot. This was a laser beam of lead. There was no convergence point to worry about. If you could see it in your sights, you could kill it. For the Zero, which lacked armor, plating, and self-sealing fuel tanks, a single burst from a P-38 wasn't just damaging, it was a death sentence. The plane would simply disintegrate or explode into a ball of fire. However, the transition wasn't immediate. The first P-38 pilots to arrive in the Pacific struggled. They were trained in the old ways of dogfighting. They tried to turn with the Zeros. It was like a heavy cavalryman trying to outmaneuver an ninja. In the early days, P-38s were lost because their pilots tried to play the Japanese game. But war is the harshest teacher. By late 1942, a new doctrine emerged, pioneered by the pilots of the 49th Fighter Group. They called it boom and zoom. The Americans stopped dancing. They utilized their turbo-superchargers to climb high above the battlefield, sitting at altitudes where the Zero's engine performance began to degrade. They would wait, watching the Japanese formation like hawks. Then, they would tip the nose over. Gravity and horsepower combined to push the P-38. Two speeds over 400, then 500 miles per hour. They would come screaming down on the unsuspecting Zeros like a meteor. Before the Japanese pilot could even turn his head, a stream of cannon fire would tear through his cockpit. And then, the most frustrating part. For the Japanese, the P-38 wouldn't stick around to fight. Using the massive kinetic energy from the dive, the American pilot would pull back. On the stick-and rocket straight back up into the high blue sky, the Zero, with its light airframe and weaker engine, couldn't follow. If a Zero pilot tried to dive after a P-38, his wings might trip off. If he tried to climb after it, he would stall. The Japanese were left helpless, watching the fork-tailed devil vanish into the sun, only to reposition for another pass. This wasn't a duel anymore. It was a drive by shooting. This psychological pressure was devastating. The ace of aces, Richard Dick Baum, perfected this style. He scored 40 kills, all in the P-38, by following a simple mantra climb. Dive, shoot, leave. It was cold, calculated, and unstoppable. The Japanese pilots at Rabaul, the elite of the elite, began to feel the walls closing in. Saburo Sakai realized with horror that his skills, the ability to turn, to loop, to fly instinctively were becoming irrelevant. The Americans refused to play by the samurai code. They used their machine's strengths to exploit the Zero's weaknesses with ruthless efficiency, and the P-38 was tough. A-Zero could be brought down by a few rifle-caliber bullets. The Lightning, however, could absorb punishment that defied belief. Japanese pilots would report seeing P-38s with one engine smoking, holes in the wings, and tails shredded. Yet the American plane would limp home on its remaining engine. The next day, patched up by ground crews, it would be back. It was an industrial war of attrition, and Japan was losing. The ultimate demonstration of the P-38's dominance came on April 18, 1943. It was a mission that changed the course of history, and it was a mission only the Lightning could fly. U.S. intelligence had decrypted a secret message. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, was flying to Bougainville to inspect troops. It was a chance to cut off the head of the snake. But the ambush point was over 400 miles from the nearest American base. No other fighter had the range to get there, fight, and get back. 16 P-38s, fitted with massive drop tanks, took off and flew at wave-top height for hours in total radio silence. They navigated over the open ocean with mathematical precision. Just as Yamamoto's bomber appeared over the jungle canopy, the P-38s dropped their tanks and pounced. The Japanese Zeros flying escort work are completely off guard. They never imagined enemy fighters could strike this deep in their territory. In moments, the Admiral's plane was flaming wreckage in the jungle. The P-38 had proven it had the legs to hunt down the enemy anywhere. In the Pacific, there was no sanctuary left. By 1944, the gap had become a chasm. The U.S. introduced the P-38J Andel models. These weren't just tweaks, they were engineering marvels. They introduced dive flaps to solve the issue of compression compressibility during high-speed dives, allowing pilots to retain control even when approaching the speed of sound. They improved the cockpit heating. They added hydraulic boosted controls. Inside the comfortable, heated cockpit of a P-38, an American pilot could fly for 6 hours and arrive at the fight fresh. Inside the freezing, unpressurized cockpit of a Zero, a Japanese pilot arrived exhausted, fighting hypothermia and fatigue before he even saw the enemy. The disparity in pilot quality widened too. The U.S. had a rotation system. Aces like Dick Bong were sent home to teach. They passed their knowledge of the boom and zoom to the next generation, a rookie American pilot entering combat in 1944. Had hundreds of hours of flight time and knew exactly how to kill a Zero without endangering himself. Japan, desperate and losing ground, kept its aces on the front lines until they died. The replacements were barely trained teenagers. They were sent up in obsolete Zeros to face veteran Americans in superior machines. It was a slaughter. By the time of the Battle of Lake Gulf and the Philippines campaign, the P-38 was operating as a tactical buzzsaw. It cleared the skies for the bombers. It swept down to strafe trains and supply convoys. It destroyed the Japanese logistical network. The P-38 shot down more Japanese aircraft than any other U.S. Army Air Force fighter in the Pacific. It was the workhorse of victory. In the final days of the war, as the desperate kamikaze tactics began, the P-38 stood as the outer guard. Its heavy firepower made it perfect for intercepting the suicide planes before they could reach the ships. A short burst from the nose cannons was enough to vaporize a laden kamikaze. One surviving Japanese pilot recalled a chilling encounter late in the war. He saw a P-38 shoot down his wingman and then, instead of fleeing, the American pilot performed a slow, lazy barrel roll over him. It wasn't a maneuver to gain position, it was a display of utter dominance. The silver twin boom Angel shone in the sun, beautiful and terrifying. The Japanese pilot realized then that no matter what he did, he could not touch that machine. He was a man with a spear fighting a tank. When the war ended, the skies of the Pacific Worst Island, save for the roar of Allied engines, the Japanese aerial samurai had been decimated. Saburo Sakue, one of the few to survive, reflected on this bitterness. He said, "We thought war was man against man. The Americans taught us it is system against system." The P-38 Lightning was the spearhead of that system. It represented a cold, hard truth. Courage cannot overcome physics. The romanticism of the dogfight was dead, buried by the industrial capacity to build a plane that flew higher, faster, and hit harder. The nightmare of the Japanese pilot on that November day in 1942 had come true. He had witnessed not just a new airplane, but the arrival of a new age. The sky no longer belonged to the samurai. It belonged to the engineers, the assembly lines, and the relentless march of technology. The P-38 Lightning was the machine that broke the spirit of the Imperial Navy, leaving behind nothing but a twin-tailed vapor trailing the wreckage of an empire. If you want more hardcore breakdowns of history, as deadliest machines, smash that like button and subscribe. I'm your strategy observer. I'll see you on the next battlefield.